Maharaj, welcome to Mumbai. What a reception.
I'm really happy to be back in Mumbai. I began reading the Bhagavad Gita. After reading one page, I had to close the book.
But how should we use material possessions for the highest benefit?
When I came to the temple, I said to one of the monks, I'm not sure if Krishna exists. And he looked at me and he said, we're not trying to convince you that Krishna exists.
We're doing our rounds every day, we're chanting, we're meditating. As we're doing that, sometimes we stay behind. What is it that we should tell ourselves to keep going?
I tell people you have to join the 5 a.m. club before you meet the 9 a.m. reality. Otherwise, it will become a 12 p.m. catastrophe.
There's a lot of people who chant the name of Krishna, Lord Shiva. There's some people who like to do Bhairav Upasana. There's kind of like this misnomer that, one is better than the other. What if I like 2 deities? What if I like 3 deities? How should I be looking at it?
It was the first time in my life when I began questioning, what is success?
How do I use anger in the right way?
The world is perfectly imperfect.
Maharaj, welcome to Mumbai. What a reception. How has it been?
It's been, firstly, thank you so much everyone for coming. It's my great honor to be with you this evening. And thank you to Harshil and Level for arranging. And yes, it's been a whirlwind weekend so far. We've had a lot of different events, and I'm really happy to be back in Mumbai. I consider Mumbai like my spiritual birthplace. When I was 21, I left London and I came to Mumbai, and it's the place where I lived my first 6 months as a monk. So I feel my roots are here in Mumbai. And so, maybe Mumbai and London, the 2 gateways to the world. Happy to be here.
Amazing. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to Kirtan Mumbai, because of who we are here today. So Maharaj, we have a few minutes to get some bombs of wisdom from you. And I'm going to try my best to ask the questions. And I'll go first with your bombs of wisdom. You said that bombs of wisdom decimating the landscape of your future is what you felt when you decided at the age of 21 to enter this life. And now it's 25 years that you've been living this life. So what was something that you heard in the early days that really helped tilt shift your perception? And anything from a particular scripture or particular line that really inspired you?
Yeah, I was coming to the temple in London from a young age. And my parents always warned me. They said, stay away from the guys in orange. They said, they're a little dangerous, they might start getting into your head. So I said, I will. I'll keep a safe distance. But when I was 15, I began reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I had many, many questions. And so I guess when I was 15, it was my first encounter with the men in orange, the monks. And they were very challenging. They wanted to really get me thinking. And I remember one of the first conversations I had with a monk, he said, sit down. So I sat down. And he said, I want you to answer true or false. So I said, okay, ask me. So he said, number 1, consensus bias. We tend to accept the ideas that are accepted by the majority of people in the world. I said, true. He said, number 2, anchoring bias. We tend to accept the ideas that were presented to us first as more substantial. I said, true. He said, 3, attentional bias. we tend to accept the ideas that are bombarded in our attention again and again as somehow more significant. I said, true. I looked at him, I said, it looks like I'm losing here. And he went on like this. And by the end of that conversation, I realized that so many of the ideas that I had accepted in my mind, I hadn't really thought about them. They were just truths that I accepted because of a bias of just kind of going with what was all around me. And so it was the first time in my life when I began questioning, what is success? What is happiness? What does my future and what should my future look like? What kind of goals and aspirations should I be setting for myself? And one of the monks said to me, the biggest lie in the world is the lie that material achievements, material arrangements, material relationships, and material accolades can make you happy. And I felt that in my heart already. But when they said it to me with their own conviction, it touched me in a different space.
And you've also spoken about when you read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time, that you didn't understand a word, but it touched you deeply.
Yeah.
So, just for some of us here, because I think we are all looking for those tunnel moments for it to touch us and feel what we need to feel. What was that moment like, and what happened at that time?
Yeah, again, it was when I was about 15 and I got a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. And for me, I had this expectation that now I'm going to be enlightened with all the answers to all the questions I've ever had in my heart. And so I came with this deep expectation. And after reading one page, I had to close the book because it was just too complex. But as I mentioned, something inside of me said that there is an incredibly authentic, valuable, and paradigm-shifting message here. If you ask me how I came to that conclusion, it's very difficult to explain it. It was a feeling in the heart. One of our devotees who met Srila Prabhupada in New York in 1965, he said he went to hear Srila Prabhupada and he heard the whole lecture, and because of Prabhupada's thick Bengali accent, he couldn't understand a word of what was being said. But he came out and he thought to himself, I don't know what he just said, but I think he's got something important to tell the world. Because there's something about the tone of his voice, the urgency and the conviction that he speaks with that tells me this is important. So I guess I had a similar feeling when I read the Gita. I realized this knowledge is going to shift my life, but it's so profound that I can't expect to just cheaply understand it in just one go like this. It's going to take time.
Mm-hmm. So when you say, the devotee in question, he said that this is important. In your reflections of life, for all of us listening, you spend a lot of time thinking about life. When you say the word important, what are some of the 3 or 4 important things about life that you've learned over these last 25 years that you can share with us today?
Yeah, thank you so much. Probably one of the most important things I've learned is start with why. Oftentimes what happens in our life is we begin doing things, the whats and the hows, but we haven't clarified the why. Why am I doing this? Oftentimes we act first and then we ask later. Whereas what Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita is that we should always ask first and act later. Oftentimes people come with this narrative in the world that religion, spirituality, that's what you do when you're old. Once you've done everything and experienced everything and achieved everything, then you do the religion bit. And it's actually the complete opposite. Because when we start with why, when we have a clear intention, and when we know what our North Star is, then we can do any what and how to achieve it. So I think that's the first thing. Always start with why. The second thing that I've learned in my life, which has shifted my trajectory in profound ways, is we are who we spend time with. The friends, the guides, the gurus, the individuals in my life who expanded my vision, the people in my life who had more faith in me than I had in myself, the people in my life who had a bigger vision for what I could achieve, much broader than what I could have come up with myself. It's those individuals that have allowed me to experience the totality of life. And so I think good friends on the journey is also another incredible lesson that I've learned. And the final thing that I think is often underrated in spirituality is that success in anything, spirituality included, does not come overnight, but success comes in installments every single day. And what I learned was the importance of commitment, consistency, discipline, and focus on a day-to-day basis if one actually wants to achieve higher states of spiritual realization. And so commitment and consistency is also, I think, a huge part of the spiritual journey.
Awesome. And, when we talk about commitment to the spiritual journey, many of us here, we're doing our rounds every day, we're chanting, we're meditating. As we're doing that, sometimes we kind of stay behind. What is it that we should tell ourselves to keep going? And, on the difficult days, just keep going.
Yeah. What we sometimes say is that there is a wall of ego which is separating us from God, us from divinity, us from Krishna. And what happens is every day when you dedicate yourself to your spiritual practice, like chanting, then what happens is you take one brick out of that wall. And then you get a glimpse of what's on the other side, but you can't really see it. And then the next day you take another brick out as you commit yourself, and you get another glimpse. And then another day you take another brick out. And sometimes along that journey you feel there's a wall still in front of me, I can't see. But then when we go back to the experiences and glimpses that we've had, then it gives us the enthusiasm to continue. And what happens is that when you take enough bricks out of that wall of ego by your dedicated practice every single day, then what happens is one day, boom, the wall comes down. And one has an audience with divinity. When I came to the temple, I said to one of the monks, I'm not sure if Krishna exists. And he looked at me and he said, we're not trying to convince you that Krishna exists. I thought, is this guy all right? Is he in the right place? I mean, what are you trying to do if you're not trying to convince me, if you don't want me to believe in Krishna? He said, we don't want you to believe. We want to equip you with the tools, practices, and processes by which you can perceive the presence of divinity at every moment in your life. We want you to experience it. And so what I would say is that chanting and the spiritual sadhana is a science. And for a scientific experiment to be successful, it requires sustained application.
And when we are doing this sadhana, just what are some of the markers that we can feel as we keep going ahead? We begin, maybe we feel this burst of energy, and then what happens, and then what happens, and then what happens. You've seen this, so maybe you can glimpse and shed some light to us on what changes.
Well, I think the first and foremost is that you experience an increasing joy in your life, an increasing ability to deal with the turbulence of the world and not become overwhelmed by it, because within yourself you have a deep anchor to a higher reality. And so those who are actually on this path of spirituality and who are progressing, they're happy. We also go out on the streets and we chant. And once I was in Scotland, and one person, he came up to me and he said, "I love you guys. You're always happy. You're always smiling. You're always dancing and singing. But don't you guys have any new songs?" So I was explaining to him that, we're happy. We're chanting the same song because it's a mantra, and that's something from a different stratosphere, which we'll talk about later. So I think, Harshil, the first thing is that we should feel an increasing happiness. One English writer, he says, "Don't trust a guru who doesn't know how to dance." In other words, if one is professing oneself to be spiritually accomplished, they should be happy. The second thing, Harshil, that happens on our journey as we move forward is that we feel an increasing detachment from the material things. The material attachments, the material worries, the material desires, the material lamentations that we often have. These things become more and more insignificant. Because what happens is, as one progresses on the spiritual path, one's vision of eternity is growing. And then all the things of this world, in comparison, begin to look very, very small. And then the third thing on the spiritual journey that happens, which is perhaps the most profound and the most beautiful, is that as one progresses on this journey, one actually feels tangible reciprocation and interaction with God. That one actually feels, yes, God is answering my prayers. God is responding to what's going on in my heart and mind. God is making arrangements. And like this, one actually feels the active participation of divinity in their life. Divinity is alive. Divinity is attentive. Divinity is affectionate. And we begin to actually perceive this in our life.
Wonderful. And, we speak about, I think sometimes the risk with speaking about material possessions is that we kind of belittle it, but we know it's important as Prakriti in this world to control and to, not control, but to channel.
Yeah.
So when we talk about material possessions, and yes, we talk about detachment and vairagya from material possessions, and that I get, but how should we use material possessions for the highest benefit?
Yeah. It's very interesting that Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to a warrior, a family man, someone very much engaged in affairs of the world. And Krishna's teaching to him was very much not to remove himself from the world, but to be successful, to achieve, but also to do it in such a way as it would elevate himself and it would elevate others around them. You see, in the world, there are three things. There's growth, there's progress, and there's happiness. And what people often do is they conflate all three and think that they're the same thing. So that if I'm growing in my riches, if I'm growing in my career, if I'm growing in my possessions, then naturally I'm growing in my happiness. But these three things are separate things. Growing means, yes, rise in your career, rise in your possessions and accolades and achievements. But growth becomes progress when we achieve that growth with ethics and with good character. In other words, it's not just about earning, but it's about earning with integrity, earning with balance, earning with conscious thinking. Then what happens is your growth becomes progress when you do it with character. And progress becomes happiness when you use that growth which has progressed you in service and contribution. In other words, when you spend and give with generosity. And so, simply the acquisition of material things will not make you happy. But if you earn with integrity and then you spend and give with generosity, then all of those acquisitions lead to actually a deep fulfillment in the heart. And then your growth becomes progress, which ultimately translates into greater levels of happiness.
Wonderful. And Maharaj, I want to, as you speak about giving and seva, there's a seva that you are doing of Think Gita. And I want to have the opportunity to hear you talk about it, what you're doing with Think Gita and how you've designed people who are beginning to learn the Bhagavad Gita, to learn through Think Gita, and how can people get associated with it? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, when I was 15, I began reading the Bhagavad Gita. And nearly 30 years later, and now you know my age, I'm still reading the Gita and it fascinates me. The Gita fascinates me because its scope is incredible. You can learn everything from leadership to lifestyle management, everything from religion to relationships. You can learn everything from science to spiritual success. Anything you want to learn, you can learn it from the Gita. It's such a profound book. So the scope of the Gita fascinates me. But also what fascinates me about the Gita is its practicality. You see, the Gita was spoken on a battlefield. And the battlefield is a very, very interesting kind of setting, because on a battlefield, the ultimate questions come to one's mind because death is on the cards. But also on the battlefield, there's an immediate question that comes to mind because there's an immediate call to action. What do I do now? The war's about to start. So a battlefield is the place where the immediate and the ultimate are both very much in focus. And therefore, the Bhagavad Gita helps one to live a life in which they address the immediate demands while being awake to the ultimate reality. If you can live like that, where you're completely down to earth, but at the same time, your consciousness is also rooted in eternity, that kind of spiritual consciousness leads one to live the most exciting and adventurous life. And I think the other thing that fascinates me about the Gita is its universal appeal. The Gita and its principles can be applied in all times, in all places, and in all circumstances. When I joined the monastery, I set myself a challenge. I said, I want to come to the point where I can speak to anyone in any situation, facing any problem, and show them something from the Gita that will help them. And the Gita is such an incredible book that it's so universal that it's a treasure house from which you can do that. So we begun this initiative, Think Gita, and the idea is to teach the Gita in a non-sectarian, non-sentimental, and non-judgmental way. We allow people from all walks of life to come, to challenge, to ask their questions, and to see how the Gita can uplift them physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually. And we have thousands and thousands of people who have benefited so far. And we invite all of you to also take part in our forthcoming courses. www.thinkgita.org. Got my advert in there.
Yeah, and I want to talk also a little bit about the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So you've done a series on the app on level SuperMind, which is fantastic. I should just tell the audience it's really broken down 6 stages of connecting with the mantra, inspired by Sachinanda Swami's book, The Holy Name, and how one can deeply connect with the mantra. Maybe if you can talk through the 6 stages of connecting with the mantra deeper. And then I want to challenge a bit in the spirit of Think Gita. I want to ask a few challenging questions.
Sure. So chanting Hare Krishna has been the one spiritual practice that has stayed with me every single day for close to 30 years. Every day when we wake up in the morning, before the notifications start coming in, the world starts moving, we join the 5 a.m. club. I tell people you have to join the 5 a.m. club before you meet the 9 a.m. reality. Otherwise, it will become a 12 p.m. catastrophe. So every day, that has been my spiritual practice. Now, I'm not going to sit here and present it romantically to you. Every day, I wake up and I chant. And as soon as I put my hand on those beads, then immediately I'm floating. Unfortunately, it's not always like that. Some days are easier. Some days are more difficult. Some days there's a natural connection with divinity. And other days we're grappling with the mind, our hopes, our fears, our desires. However, as we tune into that sound vibration, then what happens is slowly life comes into perspective. Every day after 2 hours of chanting, I come back to my life. I come back to the world. And things look different. Not because anything changed, but because internally my consciousness is now perceiving it in a different way. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And therefore, this process of chanting Hare Krishna it's so powerful. It's so simple. Bhaktivedanta Swami said, it's so simple. You may just miss it. And so Einstein, he once said something interesting. He said, you'll know how to identify the truth because the truth will have 2 characteristics. It will be simple and it will be beautiful. And if something has those 2 characteristics and gives you a deep spiritual connection, you can begin to understand there's something here. So yes, I chant every day. I continue to chant. And it's an incredible gift that I've received.
Amazing. And there's a lot of people who chant the name of Krishna There's some people who like to chant the name of Lord Shiva. There's some people who like to do Bhairav Upasana. So we are seeing an increased surge on the app right now of crazy repeats of Bhairav Upasana. And each of the scriptures is, there's kind of like this misnomer that one is better than the other, or one is above the other. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how should we see that? What if I like 2 deities? What if I like 3 deities? How should I be looking at it?
Yeah, the Vedic tradition is so beautiful. It's the most advanced theology in the world because it has spiritual hospitability. In other words, it's a multi-level spirituality which presents many, many different deities, many, many different forms of worship, many, many different mantras. And each of these forms of worship and mantra, if practiced with intention and attention, can give the chanter many, many benefits. So yes, you're right. Sometimes in the world, people juxtapose all of these mantras, these deities, these personalities in our Vedic tradition and kind of pitch them against each other as though it was a competition. Like a top of the pops chart. Which one is going to be on the top? But actually, all of these mantras and all of these deities are actually interconnected. And it's explained that in different stages of our sojourn and our journey through this world, there may be different things that we're looking for, different benedictions and boons which will help us on our journey at this particular point. And therefore, different mantras help us to gain entrance into that higher level upgrading of consciousness. So yes, whatever mantra one feels that they can connect with at this moment in time and which can help them in their journey forward is a mantra which is very much encouraged. And taking up one mantra doesn't mean that one has to be closed to all other mantras. But perhaps taking up one mantra will lead to one exploring wider and broader, and in that way benefiting from the entire gamut of what is available in the Vedic teachings.
Yeah, it's almost like this multiverse.
Yeah,
it's like the Marvel movies. For the last 10 or 12 minutes, I want to get into a bit more to the practical side of life. There's a lot of people who they want to find love and they want to love selflessly, but something blocks them. So how is it that one can love freely?
Ask the monk. It's amazing how as a monk I speak so much about love. But it's interesting because nowadays when people think of love, they always think of romantic love. But actually, love is meant for everyone and everything. The Vedic teachers, they explain, in the beginning we are expecting love. We're expecting love to happen to us. Come on, when is it coming? We're expecting love. But what the Vedic teachers actually explain is rather what we should become expert in is expressing love. And what happens is when you become expert in expressing love, then what you will experience is expanding love. This is the journey that we're trying to go on. To go from expecting love, to go to expressing love, to then experience the perfection of expanding love. And so, love in its most practical kind of manifestation in this world is an act, is service. Once a guru, he was asked by his disciple, what's the difference between loving and liking? And the guru pointed to a flower and he said, if you like it, then you'll go up to it, you'll pick it, you'll smell it, you'll enjoy it, and then you'll discard it. And then he pointed to the flower and he said, but if you love it, then you will go to it, you will protect it, you will water it, you will nurture it so it manifests its fragrance and its color, and you will allow it to fulfill its purpose in this world. So if you really love someone, then it means, what am I doing to contribute to this person's life so that their full beauty can manifest? And when that person loves you back, then they do the same for you. And these type of relationships are called transcendental. And this is what real love is.
And do I need to love everyone, or does it need
I
to
hope
be
you love
like
me.
Absolutely. Do I need to love everyone, or can life be a bit like the battlefield where I have my enemies on the other side also, and I have the people I love also? And then what's the role of anger in all this? And how do I use anger in the right way?
Sure. Okay, this is turning into a therapy session. Don't know if I'm qualified for this. Yes, do we have to love everyone? Well, I don't think we need to ask that question, because it's clear within our heart that we can't do that mechanically. So therefore, what we try to do is respect everyone. Yes, even those people who act in sometimes negative or aggressive or act with animosity, we learn to even respect those individuals. But we may keep a distance. First, we have to protect our consciousness. We have to grow in our self-love. We have to grow in our spiritual depth. And then what happens is, as we increase in our spiritual accomplishment, then we begin to be able to relate to people not based on what they do for us or how they respond to us, but we begin to relate to them on the basis of the potential that we see in them. See, it's like this. There is a horizontal relationship of love that we have with divinity. And then there are the vertical relationships of love that we have with the people of this world. What happens is, when we are drawing love from divinity, and our relationship of love with divinity is fulfilling our heart, then what happens is we begin to be able to function in our relationships of love here without any expectation from the other individual, because we are already fulfilled. Mother Teresa, in a beautiful poem called Do It Anyway, she says, sometimes people are unreasonable, illogical, unhelpful. Be kind anyway. Sometimes people will misunderstand your good intentions, but serve anyway. Sometimes the good that you do today will be forgotten tomorrow, but be good anyway. She said, because in the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And so, when we have that relationship with divinity, then we begin to relate to people not on the basis of what they're doing for me, but on the basis of what we see within them, the latent spiritual potential. And therefore, we find the most elevated spiritual personalities are able to even love and express deep compassion towards people who are often very aggressive and show animosity towards them. But this is something that we have to naturally evolve into. And so it begins by protecting our love.
And as we naturally evolve into that, what are some of the signs of, what's the role of forgiveness in all of this? So there might be some people who may have animosity towards us. They may have wronged us. They may have harmed us. How should one view forgiveness, and how should one practice forgiveness?
You ask me in the last 5 minutes. Forgive me if my answer is not comprehensive enough. Harshil, the goal of life is not to remember all the terrible things that someone has done to you. The goal of life is not to harbor all that negativity, all that bitterness, all of that frustration. The goal of life is to remember all the beautiful things that are happening to you at every moment by the grace of God. But when our heart and our minds are hijacked by all of that negativity, there's no room left to see the beauty of life. And so if we want to experience the totality of life, we have to forgive. We have to let go. But how is that possible? Because people hurt us. People do things which shock us. So the Bhagavad Gita explains that when we grasp spiritual knowledge, then our vision of ourself changes. We realize, number one, that whatever is happening to me, I am responsible for that. In other words, nothing happens to us by chance. Even the negative ways in which people interact with us, there's something in our distant past which is causing that to come. And therefore, a spiritualist first takes responsibility for their own suffering, rather than trying to blame others. So their vision of themselves changes. Then what happens is naturally the vision of other people changes, because they see that these people are not the causes of my karma. They are simply the messengers of my karma. And therefore, they don't hold those individuals responsible. That doesn't mean we don't take practical action to protect ourselves. However, one realizes they are simply the messengers, because not a blade of grass moves without the will of God. And the third thing that happens is our vision of ourselves changes, our vision of others changes, and then ultimately our vision of this world changes. And we realize all of the difficulties that I go through here are part of a master plan. The world is perfectly imperfect. In other words, this world is designed in such a way that it ultimately awakens within us the realization and the awareness and the consciousness. I'm not meant to be here. I'm meant to be somewhere else. And therefore, when some injustice is done to ourselves, then we learn to forgive, realizing that it's another reminder from divinity that this is not our true home.